And the truth is, even though I had a lot of baggage that I brought into our marriage, I truly want us to have a healthy, thriving sex life.
Yeah.
And there were times that I was intentional about my thought process, and I was intentional about reserving energy simply because I really wanted to genuinely connect with you sexually.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey there, thanks for joining, and welcome to our third episode in this series all about sex and passion in your marriage. So if you've been following us at all, then you've already been examining your individual mindset about sex, as well as worked on building some healthy dialogue with your spouse. And then last week, we took a look at some of the challenges around sex that can be unique to blended family couples. Now today, we're going to focus on some things that you can do inside and outside the bedroom that might increase the passion and connection in your marriage. So we're going to share some personal stories like we have been the last couple of weeks. We've been pretty vulnerable, huh?
Yeah.
And we're going to also talk about some general tips that can be true for any couple. And then we'll dive into some tips that are uniquely for blended family couples.
That's right. And before we jump into the conversation, if you haven't left us a rating or a review, we would so appreciate you doing that. If you are listening on Spotify, you can tap the star rating just under the description of the show. And if you're over on Apple Podcast, simply scroll down past the episodes and look for the rating and reviews section. We're so grateful for your honest feedback. All right. Maybe you want to hit pause and go do that right now and then come back and we can get started. We'd so appreciate it.
Do, 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 do. Okay, now that you're back. I love that idea. Okay, let's get started. So we've been preparing for this series and we've done a lot of reading and research. We've also had a bit of discussion about our own sex life in our current season, 21 years in.
Yeah.
We've talked about how things are going inside and outside the bedroom.
Yeah, because it all impacts.
That's right. And now we'd just love to say that after all these years of marriage, that this area of our relationship is just ticking along like clockwork and we're right where we want to be.
I wish.
But maybe you can tell by some of the stories that we've shared over the past couple of weeks that that isn't quite where we are. So we've had some healthy dialogue around what we might want to improve for ourselves.
We have.
And as I was researching, I found a simple idea in one of Ron Deal's books called The Smart Stepdad that he calls the 30-second kiss challenge. Now, I've heard this kind of thing in different durations, like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Maybe that's more your speed, honey.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I've heard it maybe in half-hour segments, too.
Oh,
but I don't
no.
know. Yeah.
I don't think so.
It. Okay. But regardless of the timeline, the point that Ron's making here is that most couples slip into a complacent pattern of engaging in either that hello, goodbye kiss that really only lasts a millisecond.
Yeah, it's like a peck.
Yeah. Or they're kissing while they're actually engaged in sexual intimacy. And there's not a lot of in between. They no longer kiss as a way to connect and stir passion, which sometimes includes sexual arousal, but not always. Now, I've read that whole thing from Ron before, but this time it really struck me that this would be an area I want to work on with you, honey. I feel like we're in a stage where more physical touch outside the bedroom that doesn't have to lead to sex will help us to deepen our feelings of connection.
Okay, so you've shared that with me, and I have to admit that my first thought was, yeah, right, that's never going to work. I feel like making out, even for just 30 seconds every day, is just going to get you wanting more sex. And if I can't show up for you in that way, then it's actually going to lead to disappointment. So what you're trying to say is that that's not what's going to happen?
Well, I won't be opposed if it leads to a bit of a bedroom rendezvous, but
Right.
I think that I have my expectation in line. From my perspective, we've migrated to that description from Ron, that our kissing is either happening in that millisecond moment, either hello, goodbye, or it's during sex. We really don't kiss just to kiss and connect much anymore.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely true. And I shared this with you the other day, honey, that I do hold back from physical touch sometimes because I have this belief that you're going to get turned on, right? And then you're going to expect sex pretty much every time. And at this stage in my life, daily sex just isn't going to work for me.
I totally get that. And yet, physical touch is my number one love language.
Right,
and
I get that too.
That doesn't mean sex, right? Holding hands, cuddling on the couch, putting your arm around me like you did when we were at the local basketball game the other day. And when we're next to each other in church, and you reach out to hold my hand or whatever it is. Those are all moments where I experience love and closeness, and it really has nothing to do with sex. So from my perspective, amping up the kissing outside the bedroom is going to increase that sense of closeness with you.
Right.
And even though physical touch is not your primary love language, I'm guessing that if we kissed more, you would benefit from a sense of closeness with me as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If your expectations are in line, right? then I'm willing to give it a try.
Sure, yeah.
Just like you, I really want to see our passion and connection increase. I really do, even though my desire for sex isn't at the same level as yours.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for that. So, even after more than 2 decades of marriage, we're still working on creating healthy dialogue around our sex life and trying some new things to help grow our passion and grow our connection.
Yeah, we want more of that.
For sure. And this daily 30-second kiss is just one simple thing that we're going to give a try. But let's talk about some additional tips that we believe are valuable for increasing passion and connection.
Yeah.
Your best sex organ is your brain. We said that a couple of weeks ago, which is why I encourage couples to start with their thoughts. 2 weeks ago, I challenged you to examine your mindset about sex. That's a great starting point. But it's also really important to examine the stories that are in your head about your spouse. This can be really difficult. But if you're working on an assumption about your spouse's thoughts or motivations and you get it wrong, then you might be headed toward less passion and connection, not more.
Right.
So as an example, I've struggled for a long time with the story in my head that you simply didn't have any desire for me, honey. I interpreted your lower libido as me being repulsive in some way. So because I was buying into the lie that you found me repulsive, then I would get resentful and either pull away or sometimes just act out kind of poorly.
Yeah. And that's been a big challenge for us in different seasons. And that story in your head really isn't an accurate story about me. And it seems that you're not the only one who struggles with the story in your head, honey.
Really? Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah. Shanti and Jeff Feldhahn share this exact thing in their book called For Men Only.
Yeah.
They actually did a sizable study that reported this. Among women who reported that they desire sex less than their husbands, a full 75% indicated that it had nothing to do with his desirability, his sexual prowess, or general studliness.
Oh, good. I got good prowess and studliness then.
In fact, of the remaining 25%, less than 4% said their lower interest in sex had anything to do with their husband's attractiveness or desirability.
Wow.
So what that means is that more than 90% in their case studies, the wives commonly have less desire for sex, not less desire for their husband.
Yeah. Wow. Honestly, it's been difficult for me to change that story in my head. But the point is, leaving our stories about each other unexamined is going to lead to misunderstandings and even conflict.
Yes.
And that doesn't sound like a path to passion or connection.
No,
right?
Just the opposite.
So I want to challenge everybody listening to examine the story in your head about your spouse and then set about having a healthy dialogue to try and correct those stories.
Right.
And that leads to another tip, creating opportunity to have that healthy dialogue around actual barriers.
Right.
My believing that you don't desire me is a false barrier because it's a story in my head as opposed to a functional or practical barrier. But you know what? We've run into some real life barriers as well, one of which we shared last week.
Yeah, I shared about how your habit of drive-by touching would create a real life barrier in my openness to engaging sexually with you because I shut down.
Right.
And like we shared, it took us about 15 years of marriage to have a genuinely healthy dialogue around that because these topics are so sensitive.
For sure.
And part of that was because of my fears about hurting your feelings in sharing what was going on and talking about that barrier.
Yeah, that's right. And, the other part was my willingness to listen to you without being offended.
Right.
In fact, when we learned some practical communication tools around how we can build unity even when we aren't seeing eye to eye and how to problem solve together as a team, that we finally broke through the barrier of this unhealthy dialogue pattern around this very real barrier in our sex life.
Yeah, we had to learn how to manage our emotions well and show up well for each other, even when we were talking about really tough stuff.
Yeah. The crazy thing was that experiencing only a few healthy conversations around that specific subject was one of the catalysts to us learning how to coach couples to adopt those same tools and implement them in their marriage as well, which is one of our most popular coaching programs right now.
Yeah, we thought, wow, it worked for us. Let's share it.
And the best part is that these tools aren't just about building unity and solving problems in our sex life. They're really about every difficult situation and conversation within your marriage. So anyway, if you want to know more about that or how you can learn those skills just like we did, head over to the show notes and schedule a free coaching call with us to talk about that. And as you work on healthy dialogue around real barriers, you want to hold on to that healthy mindset that sex is not about individual gratification, but about mutual fulfillment. It's about both of us really engaging and enjoying that time together.
Right.
And remember, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago too. So focus on your mutual enjoyment, your mutual satisfaction, your mutual fulfillment in this area of your sex life, and have healthy dialogue around the real barriers and stay focused on finding a solution to the problem together.
Yeah. Stay out of blame.
Yeah.
Stay out of being overly sensitive or overreacting. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong in these dialogues, but really find healthy ways.
Yeah.
Now let's share the next tip, which is also about healthy dialogue. But this time it might be inside the bedroom.
Oh, boy.
In the book, The Smart Step Family Marriage, Ron Deal and David Olson suggest that you need to take responsibility for your own pleasure. So don't just assume that your spouse will automatically know what you like and dislike in your sex life. Learning to use assertive communication skills to share what you enjoy and what you don't can really help here.
Yeah, and note that that's assertive, not aggressive communication. Right. Two totally different
things. Not demanding.
That's right. In order for this to work well, you've got to be able to trust each other, to share your preferences. And again, you're seeking mutual benefit here.
Right.
So we're looking for the common ground on the kind of things that honor both of you. Both you and your spouse should come away from sex feeling honored and cherished and connected.
Absolutely. Chances are you'll run into some moments where one spouse has a preference that just doesn't work for the other partner. I mean, that's just normal.
Sure.
And there's lots of reasons why that can happen. But just like I shared about the struggles with Mike's drive-by touching outside the bedroom last week and how that was a negative trigger from my past, spouses may have some negative triggers inside the bedroom too.
Yep.
So be sensitive to each other's preferences. Communicate assertively and clearly and listen with a curiosity mindset. Be patient. Like Mike mentioned, seek the common ground that honors both of you and that you both really enjoy.
For sure. And, I want to encourage you to push through the awkwardness that you might run into when you're having a clear conversation about things like sexual preferences.
Right.
And part of our struggle with this over the years was the fact that we both grew up in homes that simply didn't talk about sex. And I don't think we're alone in that.
No.
I think lots of people, it was kind of off limits, and we probably learned whatever we learned from our buddies on
our peers.
From our friends in junior high or in the media. And those aren't very credible resources, honestly.
Or even in pornography.
Yeah, for sure. The research shows that our ability to talk about sex is actually a reflection of what we witnessed in our formative years. So if your parents were uncomfortable talking about sex, that might have rubbed off on you. But if you can push through the awkwardness, talk openly and clearly about what each of you genuinely enjoy, and then be responsive to each other without demanding, you're going to be on a great path toward mutual satisfaction in your sex life and probably feel much more connected.
Right.
We just had a conversation like that this morning,
We
actually.
did.
We've been talking a lot about sex the last few weeks because we've been doing these episodes. And so it's spurred a lot of conversation about our own life together.
Yeah, and there were some awkward moments.
Sure,
Even 21 years in, it's still hard to
Exactly.
talk about this stuff.
Yeah. And yet I feel connected and honored simply by having the conversation and being real with each other.
Yeah, we didn't shut down or turn on each other. We hung in there even in the awkwardness.
Yeah, totally.
That's come a long way for us.
Oh, yeah. We should celebrate that.
Yeah. All right. So those are 3 tips around mindset and healthy dialogue. Examine the stories in your head about your spouse. Discuss those real barriers that keep you from engaging sexually, and then talk openly and respectfully about your likes and your dislikes in the bedroom. So let's move on to talk a little bit about your individual self-care, because this is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
Because if you want to have a healthy and consistent sex life, you need to be able to identify and mitigate the things that reduce your sexual desire, right?
Yeah.
And there can be a lot of them. You know, ladies, for us, responding to our husband's sexual advances with, I'm too tired, that's no lie. That's a valid reality.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we are the only ones who are capable of managing our own exhaustion, right? If you find yourself wanting to avoid sex because of fatigue or exhaustion, then it might be time to get really practical with yourself. Identify what drains you, and then identify what replenishes your energy throughout your week. This is a great first step. Just take notice of those things. Then you'll probably need to take some intentional steps to avoid those things that drain you once in a while, and then do those things that replenish you and refill you.
I'm so glad you're talking about this, because I think it's really easy, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience with you, it can be really easy for ladies to say, well, I've got all this going on and I'm really tired, and kind of fall into the mindset that I can't do anything about that.
Right.
I'm tired. But what I hear you saying is, well, wait a second, maybe we actually can do something about that. What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple,
And creating more connection as a family,
experiencing partnership in parenting.
and even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck, and quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it. Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
Yeah. So here's an example. Let's just say that one of the things you've realized is you're identifying your drains. You've realized that, when you've been cleaning the house for a couple hours, that leaves you feeling exhausted. And there's no chance you're going to feel very amorous later that evening. You're not going to want to have sex, right? Well, it could be that on certain days, you decide on what is the priority. Is cleaning or connecting with your husband the priority? And don't be afraid to communicate with your husband around this. I spent over 7 years as a stay-at-home mom, and most of the time it was really exhausting. But using this simple example, what I could have done is tell Mike, honey, I want our sex life to be engaging, fun, and vibrant, and I know that on the days I need to clean, I'm just exhausted. So I'm going to plan to make Wednesday, my deep cleaning day. And I'd really appreciate if we could come to an agreement that Wednesday night is just not going to happen in the bedroom for us.
Okay, yeah.
But that will help me to be able to show up more on other nights of the week when I can reserve energy. Do you think that could have helped me to honor you in that situation? If I had done something like that, would it have been helpful for you?
Yeah, I think it would have been really great. I mean, I would have been happy to help you in practical ways to improve our sex life. No problem at all, right? And there were certain seasons where we kind of did the opposite. We actually scheduled nights for sex rather than scheduling no sex. And, there are some experts out there that actually suggest scheduling a regular time for sex, and that works for a lot of couples, and it's something that listeners might want to try. But that didn't work very well for us, because what ended up happening is it actually started to put pressure on you on those evenings that we were scheduled for.
Yeah.
And I think that pressure actually counteracted what we were looking for. Sure, you may have made yourself available, but that didn't mean you were engaged.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I do like to have a heads up.
Yeah.
But I don't like to have to pinpoint
it has to
time.
be at that time. Yeah. And honestly, I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to do it, but it's okay to try different things in different seasons.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, I kind of like the idea of 1 or 2 agreed upon no sex nights per week to help kind of manage fatigue and pressure. And then, then that leaves 4, 5, 6 nights of the week that we could be more spontaneous. Now, there's probably a danger zone in that, and I'm going to just speak to husbands to say, look, don't expect that, that means those other 5 or 6 nights I'm going to get sex every time. Don't expect that. What I'm saying is that there's an openness or a possibility, but that might be another really practical conversation about what's a healthy rhythm. What are our expectations? Like, we've been working with some pre-blending couples, kind of experimenting with some new things, and we're using a tool called Symbis that's been developed by Les and Leslie Parrott, and it has a little section in there about what are our expectations around sex, right? And one of the things it asks is, what's our expectation about frequency?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Great. You know what? I don't care if you're pre-blending or if you're like us and you've been married 21 years, maybe you talk about that. So that, in combination with this idea of a no sex night, or 2 in the week, is okay. Wednesday and Sunday night are out, or whatever you would choose. And hey, let's just agree that once a week or twice a week,
whatever
we're gonna find ways, and we're gonna work it into those other 5 or 6 days. So anyway, I'm getting on a tangent here a little bit, but
yeah, you are.
But that's okay. I just want to make it really clear. What we're not saying is, just because we have a couple of no sex night agreements, we're not saying that every other night is
right,
on.
Right. What we're really talking about is reserving energy.
Yeah.
And there might be times to say, well, the house will just have to be dirty for another day. Or maybe you just kind of spot clean in an area or 2 so that you're not completely exhausted by the deep cleaning.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. So pay attention to what drains you. That's the real point of all this, right?
Yep.
Pay attention to what drains you and do your best to mitigate that around your rhythm in your sex life with your spouse.
Right.
And you also mentioned to pay attention to what fills you, right? Say more about that.
Yeah. You can intentionally identify the things that replenish your energy and then engage in those things.
Yeah.
Especially on the days when you think there might be some bedroom connection time, right? Those open days.
Sure.
Maybe it's a quiet hour with a cup of coffee and a great book, or maybe it's taking a bubble bath, or maybe you're a creative and you need some time to paint or play on your piano, or maybe you're like me, you like to scrapbook.
That'd be more than an hour.
Yeah, probably. But identify what it is for you and then spend some time doing that regularly. Take care of yourself in that way. You're the only one that can do that.
Yeah.
And you might even tell your husband, hey, hon, I'm going to take a bath and I'll be about an hour or so. And then maybe we can have a little private time after the kids go to bed tonight. What do you think?
Oh, man, that would have definitely worked for me. Like, I'll put the kids to bed. I'll take care of that. No problem, right? If that had been a habit back when our kids were younger, I definitely would have been happy to help you out with whatever you needed help with. Not that I think I'm
you're
pretty
very
helpful anyway.
Yeah, but you would have honored my time of replenishment.
Totally. Yeah. And, I'm kind of noticing a theme here. It seems like you're suggesting that you intentionally communicate with your husband about these things, about the drains and about the fills.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that might be important, and it may have helped us earlier in our marriage. We're doing a lot of hindsight here.
Yeah, no
what
doubt.
could we have done differently?
Yeah.
And I know that there were plenty of times I avoided sex or was kind of absent during sex, and that's not very helpful.
Yeah.
But, and we didn't talk about it. We didn't have open dialogue.
We didn't.
But for me, it's good if I can take some time to prepare myself mentally for sex. So on those days when I'm reserving some energy so that we can connect sexually, I'm also being intentional about thinking about specific things that I'm attracted to you. And sometimes I think about our past sexual experiences that we've enjoyed together. That kind of helps to grease the wheels for connection time. Thinking about you sexually helps me to physically warm up so that I'm able to engage in those times.
That makes sense. I remember once a while back when, you kind of showed up and I was like, wow, where did that come from?
Right.
And you were like, of all things, you were like, I was cleaning the bathroom today. You were dusting a picture frame that had a picture of us from our honeymoon in that place we stayed at that had the jacuzzi and all that stuff.
Had a jacuzzi in the room.
Yeah, that was like the night after our wedding night. And you were like, I was just thinking about that. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that was hot and steamy. Not just because of the jacuzzi. Yeah. And the truth is, even though I had a lot of baggage that I brought into our marriage and a lot of hang-ups, I truly want us to have a healthy, thriving sex life. I've always wanted that.
Yeah.
And there were times that I was intentional about my thought process and I was intentional about reserving energy simply because I really wanted to genuinely connect with you sexually. And chances are you could tell the difference when we had sex in those moments when I really showed up well.
Yep.
But you probably had no idea about the intentional actions I took leading up to that connected sex, what it took for me to get there.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering if I had told you about what I was doing and been more open about that, if that could have helped you feel more desirable maybe and change that story in your head a little bit.
Oh, yeah, that's a great thought. And I think you're right about that. That may have helped me to just relax a little bit. And I probably would have partnered with you a lot better.
Right.
Inside and outside the bedroom. Not that you're responsible for me to partner well.
Right.
I mean, that's my responsibility. But it's always great when we can help our partner love us better.
Yeah, say that again.
It's always great when we can help our partner love us better.
Oh, yeah.
Neither of us are mind readers. And honestly, it's still difficult for me to gauge whether it's a good time to pursue sex with you or not. And we've been together 21 years, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We've made a lot of headway, but we certainly could still make some improvements. So, ladies, I encourage you to get intentional here. Identify what drains you and get creative. Find some ways to manage those in a way that helps you to engage. And then invest some time in self-care. Fill your own energy tank with the intention of showing up well with your husband. And along the way, tell him what you're doing. Share with him. Chances are he'll really appreciate that. So what about for guys, hon? What do they need to pay attention to when it comes to managing the things that reduce sexual desire and increase responsiveness? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I can already hear a lot of guys thinking, I might need to reduce my sexual desire a bit to get more in sync with my wife, not increase it, right? And that can be true, but it's not always true, right? One area that can really impact guys is stress. And a lot of us husbands have a big focus on providing for our family, not just financially, but functionally as well, right? We work lots of hours per week. We maintain the house. We take care of yard work. We maintain vehicles. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And, all that can pile up on us and it can feel overwhelming sometimes. And for a lot of guys, that mounts up stress and it can impact our approach to sex. So for some, it actually lowers the libido. And there's so much on our mind sometimes that it's just like there's no room for another thing. Too much stress can distance us from our wives, and an emotional distance can ultimately lead to less time in the bedroom. Now, you might get caught believing that it's no big deal that you're distracted from sex because she doesn't want it anyway, but don't buy that. Instead, start to focus on how you're able to manage that stress. Part of your stress management plan will certainly be about time management and boundaries. For most of us, that's especially true around our careers, right? But one of the number one things that can help with stress management is regular exercise. So believe it or not, expending some physical energy through exercise can burn off some of that testosterone and start to melt away some of the stress. And when you make that a regular part of your life, you might just show up better in the bedroom, both emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
And there's something else about being overstressed that can have a real negative drain on our sex life with our wives. When we get caught up in trying to use sex as that stress relief, that can be a real challenge.
Right.
It's true that sexual gratification is a stress reliever in itself for most men. But simply trying to get a stress relief need met is not going to add vibrancy and connection in the bedroom.
No.
That actually creates a dynamic for what we call disconnected sex that we talked about back in episode 126 just a couple of weeks ago. So I wonder, have you ever experienced that with me, honey?
Yeah, I have. And when that happens, that disconnected sex, I am often left feeling used rather than cared for.
Yeah.
And that has an implication. The next time, you're making advances towards sex, I start to wonder if you're genuinely wanting to connect with me or if you're just trying to get your physical need met.
Absolutely.
That can be really frustrating and stressful and hurtful for me, and it doesn't make for a great time in the bedroom.
I totally understand that, and I'm sorry that there have been times where I've treated you that way in our sex life. Guys, the point is that stress can be a negative drain on a fulfilling sex life for you either way, whether you're having lots of sex or a little bit of sex. If you're not taking responsibility to intentionally manage your stress, you're probably in a danger zone in this area. So if you're feeling overstressed, man, get to the gym, go for a run, start figuring out what kinds of healthy personal boundaries you might need to set so that you can show up in a relaxed and caring way with your wife. Chances are she's going to respond a lot better to that approach than the stressed out, anxious, person that she sometimes sees, either avoiding her or pawing at her for your own gratification. Right.
That's not good.
Remember that healthy mindset. Sex is not about individual gratification, but about mutual fulfillment. Something funny that just occurred to me, we're in February, right? So statistically, most people make a New Year's resolution and say, okay, I want to get in shape. I want to get to the gym, right? And so right about now, as this episode's releasing, people are dropping out. Like the gym is getting really empty. It's starting to become a ghost town in there, right? what if our motivation, guys, I'm just throwing it out there. What if it's like, oh yeah, me doing this is actually going to have the potential to improve my sexual connection with my wife.
Right.
Boy, that's a lot better than a New Year's resolution to me. Anyway.
Right.
I don't know.
And I just want to add, ladies, we experience a lot of stress too. And sometimes that can be associated with physical ailments. Things like headaches, physical problems, emotional issues. I mean, I've been through it all. I've had chronic fatigue syndrome because my thyroid was all out of whack. I have had hormonal issues. I had postpartum depression.
Yeah.
I have chronic pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it's tempting to use that as an excuse. No, honey, no sex tonight. My back hurts, or I have a headache. And there is validity to these things. We do have ailments and issues, but take responsibility for those things. Don't just throw up your hands and say, oh, this is it. I can't because of this.
Yeah.
I know it's not easy. I've gone to naturopaths. I've done acupuncture. I've done physical therapy.
Yeah.
I have to exercise regularly so that my lower back doesn't seize up. It's so worth it.
Yeah, and in those seasons where you do kind of throw up your hands and you say, oh, well, I just don't feel good, that's frustrating for me. But in those other seasons, when I see you being really tenacious about going, no, I'm going to resolve this because I want us to be able to be connected, I feel really honored and I feel really loved because you're putting the effort in to do something and make sure that you're protecting this area of our marriage.
Yeah.
So I agree. Yeah. You and only you can do that. I can't force you to go to the doctor.
No. And then when I am putting forth the effort and you see that, on those days when I really can't, when I'm just like, oh my gosh, my back is in a really bad way, honey.
You're
I'm
more
understanding.
Yeah. I get it more. And I feel like, okay, well, that's okay tonight, but I know it won't be like every night.
Because I'm working on it. So ladies, take responsibility for your energy levels, but also take responsibility for your physical health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's important for each of you to take personal responsibility for those things that reduce your ability to engage in your sex life in a healthy way. Ladies, consider working on your energy levels. And guys, think about managing that stress. Those are some general tips that are just true for a lot of couples.
Yeah.
But let's examine some unique challenges for blended family couples.
Yes, and this is so important. Just like we all enter into blended family life with some triggers and baggage from the past, relationally and emotionally, most of us enter in with some sexual baggage as well.
That's right.
So one of the first things you can do is to be sure you're not making comparisons. Now, it might seem obvious, but don't let comments like, why can't you touch me like so-and-so did?
Oh, man.
Ooh. Or what's wrong with doing that? It worked for me in the past.
Ugh, yikes.
Clearly, none of us want to be compared to our spouse's previous sexual partner.
Clearly. That kind of thing is going to be a real turn-off. But, there are a couple of other subtle ways that this can happen, too. We've already suggested that sharing with your partner about your likes and dislikes is a healthy thing to do when it's done lovingly and respectfully. However, if you add comments about how maybe that was lacking in your previous relationship, that's a comparison.
Right.
And that might put some undue pressure on your spouse, too, to engage in a way that they're not completely on board with because they feel pressured to do this kind of thing to make up for your previous disappointments. That is not a good place to be.
Yeah.
Instead, simply learn to share your likes and dislikes without reference to anything previous in no other previous relationships. Now, we're not suggesting that you withhold relevant, meaningful, emotional issues from each other. Those are two different things. But step couples are rebuilding a new life together that's uniquely theirs. And that includes your sex life. You want it to be uniquely yours.
For sure. And another comparison trap to avoid is the one you might be making in your mind.
Oh, yeah.
Whether those thoughts or images in your mind are good or bad, lingering on them in your mind will not be helpful for you. Staying focused on that means you're focused on the past rather than being fully present and connected in the moment with your current spouse.
Yeah.
You're building a new romance with your current spouse, and your sexual connection is uniquely your own as a couple. So keep yourself focused on the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
And as you do that, be open to some new ideas and some new preferences.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about healthy dialogue around likes and dislikes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes as the listener, we might approach that conversation with closed ears and a closed heart.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not in any way saying that you need to be open to something that's inherently disrespectful or devaluing of you. We all need healthy boundaries in the bedroom.
Yep.
On the flip side, don't stay stuck in a rut
Yeah.
and don't close down to new ideas.
Yeah.
Listen to your spouse and be willing to try something different.
Mm-hmm.
A sex life that's filled with fun and a little variety that's nurturing and giving might just turn out to be mutually fulfilling.
That's right. And, sometimes we need practical help around something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And a while back, we found a book called The Love List by Les and Leslie Parrott,
Yeah.
who we referenced earlier. And it's a great book talking about some real practical ways that you can invest in some things both inside and outside the bedroom that are going to help with this. And I think it's great for every couple, but I think sometimes we've got to engage in that kind of practical help with blended family couples because we're building this new thing, this new romance together. And at the same time, we're kind of undoing something old.
Right.
Sometimes we just need help doing that. It's hard.
Yeah, we're digging up an old foundation and pouring a new one, and we need some good material to pour that new foundation. And this book is a great read together. It's an easy read. It's really fun.
Really practical, kind of step by step,
Absolutely.
And honestly, I think it'll help us with this kind of kind-hearted adventure together in the bedroom.
I like that.
That may take some time to develop.
Yeah.
I remember in 1988, Phil Collins released the song "Groovy Kind of Love." Remember that song?
Yeah.
Yeah. I could. You want me to sing
don't
it?
sing
Aw.
it. Please don't.
But really, that's what step couples need time to develop, kind of their couple groove. As you leave the past behind and create your own new, unique sexual relationship, you've got to do some learning about what your groove is going to look like.
Right.
As Ron Deal puts it, learning how to read each other, when to respond with specific touch, or what your couple's sexual style is going to take time. So learn as you go and share what you learn.
I love that.
I really love that. Yeah. One aspect of your groove is probably connected to your environment. So let's face it, there's a lot of distractions to sex when it comes to busy blended family life.
Absolutely.
And guys, this can be a real challenge for your wife. You need to pay close attention to this. Last week, we shared that we learned from Shanti and Jeff Feldhahn that a lower level of sexually assertive hormones, meaning a lower drive for sex in women, equals more susceptibility to non-sexual distractions.
Yes.
Okay, so they've got a lower libido, lower drive. That means they're going to be easily distracted or more easily distracted. And distracted like things like your beeping cell phone, noise from the kids' room, a headache, the dog barking, stress of the leftover thoughts from her day. All of these things can really kill the mood for her. And in a blended family, your wife might be worried about the 13-year-old stepson in the other room and in earshot. That could be a real distraction from her. I don't want him listening in, right?
Yeah.
We all need to think about the timing and the environment when it comes to our sex life. You might need to talk together about how you can create some more moments and spaces that are distraction-free. The reality is that most blended families have a lot more moving parts that can create distractions than maybe a first family could experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One tip for couples who have kids moving back and forth between homes is, it seems obvious, but get intentional about centering some of your sexual energy around those days where you might have an empty house.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
a great time.
Yeah. Don't allow the busyness and all the things that have to happen to rob you of what could be some really great moments for you.
Reserve some energy.
For sure.
And that leads us to the next tip that we want to focus on. And this might be the thread that ties all of what we've been talking about together. And that's creativity.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sometimes you just have to get creative, especially as it relates to the environment and the timing. Practical things like planning a weekend getaway when you just can't seem to find private time because all of the activity in the house Or you might need to sneak a quickie in the shower here and there, since that can sometimes be the only privacy that seems to exist, right? That's getting creative.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And what you just mentioned is the word creativity. So don't let that kind of thing turn into a rut.
Right.
You know, guys, you might find the quickie fun and satisfying, but if that's the primary focus of your sex life, that's likely not going to bring long-term fulfillment, mutual fulfillment for both of you. The reality is that you and your wife are fundamentally different. Right? Comedian Jeff Foxworthy says that women are like diesel engines. They take a while to warm up, but once they do, they can run a long, long time. Men, on the other hand, are like bottle rockets. A fiery launch toward the heavens is followed by an explosion and a rapid descent toward Earth, or in some cases, sleep, right? Now, sure, that's kind of funny, but the truth that it highlights is this gap between us. So here's the thing, guys. It's great that your wife might be willing to join you for that shower quickie once in a while, but more often than not, you're going to need to slow things down. And I know we've heard all this before, but us guys are kind of dense when it comes to all this sometimes, right? So in that book For Men Only, Jeff Feldhahn starts his chapter this way about sex. There's one chapter in there about sex, and he says, this chapter is going to be the ultimate test of your manhood, okay? I'm going to ask you to do two things and to do them at the same time. Number one, think clearly. Number two, about sex. So let's just get real, guys. You know, most of us struggle to think clearly when it comes to sex. So the reality is that we just need to be reminded a lot of the time that our wives need to be cherished, both inside and outside the bedroom. And when you slow down, when you're attentive to her desires, to her likes, to her dislikes, and you cherish her in that way, chances are she'll be responsive to you.
Absolutely.
And guys, you know as well as I do that whether you're sneaking the quickie or whether you're taking 20 minutes or more as simply, you know, just to focus on your wife, your result will still likely be the same.
Right.
So be intentional about finding the time and the environment where you can take your time. Be creative in all that.
Yeah. And I mentioned taking a getaway a moment ago. Lots of experts suggest that some kind of monthly rendezvous that's outside the norm of your sexual routine can help you build connection and variety.
Right.
And it can give you both something to look forward to each month.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be expensive or even outside of your home. It might be simply taking several of the tips that we've been sharing and including them all in one day or one evening when you've got the house to yourself. It might even include sending the kids to the grandparents for a sleepover or to a friend's house. But be intentional and get creative.
That's right.
Sex is a gift for your marriage, and it should be fun. But for so many of us, it can end up being a source of stress, pressure, and conflict. Don't let that happen. Do something to keep it fun and enjoy it as a gift. And as you do that, expect your sex life to have different seasons. Sex in our 20th year of marriage looks a lot different than it did in year one.
That's for sure,
That's normal, and you should expect it to change over the years. If you're in a season now where it's difficult and stressful, then reach out to someone who can help you. Don't just settle for disconnection or difficulty in your sex life.
That's right. And remember that a lack of sex or stressful sex can be a drain on your marriage. And while frequent sex does not equate to a healthy marriage, right? Having a frequent sex life doesn't mean that your marriage is healthy. But an unhealthy or stagnant sexual relationship with your spouse can leave you both depleted and disconnected. It's a drain on your marriage. So have the courage to face the unique challenges that you may have identified over the past few weeks, and then set about creating a plan that will lovingly and practically draw you closer and create connection.
Right. You know, we've shared pretty vulnerably over the past few weeks about just some of the challenges we've faced in our sex life. And that was only a few of the things that we've had to overcome.
That's right.
We've had to get really practical and courageous in order to love each other well and cherish this area of our marriage together. And the truth is, we're still navigating how we can keep improving our sexual relationship together.
Yeah.
So we're not challenging you to do anything beyond what we've done ourselves. And trust me, if we can navigate all of this, so can you.
For
you
sure.
really can.
That's right. And, you know, we really hope that this 3-part series has been helpful and maybe even inspiring for you. And we really hope that you can clear the barriers and find a groove that will create mutual fulfillment in your sexual relationship.
Yes.
And if you need help learning how to talk through some tough topics together, don't hesitate to set up that free coaching call with us, and we'll see if we might be able to help you with that. We don't want you to simply survive your blended family life together. We really want you to thrive. So head over to the show notes and just schedule that call with us now. We'd be really happy to help.
Yeah. Now, don't miss next week's episode. We're going to talk about a big topic that can also impact your sexual relationship, and that's trust.
Yeah, that's right. I'm excited for that conversation because that impacts not just our sex life, but so many, like pretty much our entire marriage.
Yeah,
So,
and blended family couples definitely struggle with trust because of
Absolutely.
past experiences. So.
yeah. So don't miss that. But that's going to make this episode and this series a wrap.
Until next time.